Muralidharan. Vivek is a software engineer. He works for Shutterfly Incorporated, and he's been in Toastmasters for nearly 5 years now. He's giving a project from his path, which is called Presentation Mastery. And the project is called Connect with Storytelling. It's 5 to 7 minutes. The title of his speech is My First Flight. Let's welcome Vivek Muralidharan. Vivek, you're muted.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry, guys. Yeah. How many of you remember the very first time you traveled in a flight? I vividly remember mine. What an experience it was. I would like to share my experience with you all. For the first 16 years of my lifetime, whenever I see an airborne flight, I used to be amazed at what it is to fly in it. Back in 2007, during the times of Christmas break, myself and my parents decided to visit my sister in a city called Delhi, which is in northern part of India. My sister was working there in a fashion technology field. We decided to visit her. So we made necessary travel arrangements. Before the travel arrangements, I would like to give you a picture of how different Delhi is from the place where I was staying, which was in southern part of India called as Chennai. They are diametrically opposite with respect to weather as well as distance. Delhi is located in northern part of India and Chennai is in southern part of India. With respect to winters, the Chennai weather is specifically pretty pleasant in winter, but it's not too cold. Whereas in Delhi, it can be a bit cold when compared to an Indian person who is from a tropical weather. So I just picked up some weather data from 2007 around the same time I visited. So during the month of January 1st, the peak was at 56 and the low was at 51 in Delhi. Whereas in Chennai, it is like much warmer with the minimum at 70 and maximum at 85. We made the necessary travel arrangements. We decided to travel by train during our onward trip. And during our return trip from Delhi to Chennai, we decided to travel in a flight, which was going to be our maiden flight. None of us have traveled in a flight before. We did have a great trip. To summarize, to just skip to the main part of the trip, which was a flight during our return journey. There came the flight trip. On the 1st of 2007, the 1st January of 2007, I was pretty much pumped up for the trip. I was excited. During that time, we reached the airport on time, and even the routine check-ins were alien to me that time. We did that and we entered the terminal and kept on checking the rectangular LED displays for our flight schedules. Most of the flights were either delayed or getting cancelled due to the fog. Luckily, one of our flights, the ones that we were going in, was on time. Then the time came for boarding the flight. Back in those days, there were no And there was no facility to directly board the flight from the terminals, so we had to take a bus and go back to the terminal, and from the terminal take the bus and go to the place where the flight is located. We went there. While going along the way, I looked at a lot of flights that was parked in the tarmac. I was getting pretty pumped up and excited even more. And as we were boarding the flight, I looked over those two giant engines, and those amazed me. I used to wonder how these flying creatures even existed. And I noticed the red and orangish color on the flights. As I entered inside the flight, though, it quite of resembled like a bus. The only difference I felt is the aisles of the bus were much wider in my cities. As I got settled in figuring out how to wear the seat belt, the air hostess and the flight attendants basically closed the flight doors, and they made the necessary arrangements for takeoff. They ran the couple of safety checks, like safety drills, like putting on the oxygen mask, as well as using how to use the seat belts as flotation. During those times, it reminded me of a mutual fund investment ad, which says mutual fund investments are subject to market risk. So I was also wondering, my flight might be risk, but I didn't pay much attention to any of those emergency drills. At the same time, the pilots were revving up the engines, and I could see the wings moving up and down near my window. All that was left was taking off from the ground. I waited for 5 more minutes. The plane was still on the tarmac with the engines revving up. I was wondering what was happening. I had waited for 16 years for my first flight. All wouldn't matter if I waited for a few more seconds. Then the pilot came on PA, the public announcement, and made an announcement. He said that the visibility has dropped to 500 meters and they are waiting for clearance for takeoff. When I looked outside the window, I could see the aircraft towers that were clearly visible. Few more minutes passed by, still the flight was in tarmac. Then the pilot again came on PA. During this time, he made an announcement that the visibility has dropped to 200 meters. During this time, the fog has engulfed most of the aircraft tower. I started to worry whether I would be able to even take off on my very first flight. My worry started to become a reality because the plane didn't take off for another 5 minutes before, after which the pilot announced that the visibility has dropped to 50 meters. And he said that the aircraft control tower has declined the takeoff. For just going inside the plane and sitting, I could have spent my time inside the museum rather than going to an airport and doing all that. I was pretty disappointed. I could sense the chaos in everyone who were present. The who likes to have their flight cancelled and have their schedule disturbed late night. In particular, to add insult to the injury, who would like to have their first flight cancelled? I was pretty disappointed. Back in those days where mobile internet was not even popular, my father spent close to 2.5 hours in airport to have the schedule altered for the schedule rebooked. So we got our flight rebooked for January 3rd. We had a couple of more days. And in hindsight, I would say those couple of days helped us to have a additional time with the family. And we even visited our aunt as a bonus who lived in Jaipur, which was close to Delhi. And the D-Day came on the 3rd of January. And during those times, we went to the airport on time, and now we are pros at checking in. It was no more alien, and weather gods were kind enough on that day for us. I experienced the very first takeoff. I would say the very first time the flight even hit that acceleration speed for the takeoff, it was an exhilarating experience. The very first time the flight left the ground, we can even feel as if I was the one who was piloting the plane. It was pretty hard to describe it in words. I would have done aircraft travel a lot of times after that, but the very first time I did my aircraft travel, it is the most cherished experience that I always have. Thank you, Toastmaster.
Okay, while Vivek is getting off the ground, we'll have one time to